This is the Randolph Caldecott Medal, awarded each year by the Children's Services Division of the American Library Association for the most distinguished picture book for children. The 1963 selection was Where the Wild Things Are, a book written and illustrated by Maurice Sendak. Soon after the announcement of his award, we interviewed Mr. Sendak at his attractive two-floor apartment on this busy street in New York City, where he lives and works. We asked him to comment about the influences that contributed to his development as an artist.
Well, this is my studio, or I should say part of the studio. This is the part I sleep on. And the other part of the studio is where I work. This is the first time I've seen it as brilliantly lit. Usually it is pitch dark, which will come as a shock to a lot of people who think artists need floods of gorgeous sunlight. But I haven't seen sunlight in the studio, or in any studio I've had in this city, for as long as I can remember. I'm surrounded by things that I keep around for good luck charms or keep me company. On the walls are pictures that I'm very fond of and frequently change to keep in the mood of whatever work I'm working on. On the other side of the room is a bookcase filled with books on research and books of pictures. On top of that is my record player, which I could hardly live without. I do most of my work to music, and music plays an extremely important part in my work. Depending on what I'm doing at the moment, there's always a specific kind of music I want to listen to. All composers have different colors, as all artists do, and I kind of pick up the right color from either Haydn or Mozart or Wagner while I'm working. And very often I will switch recordings endlessly until I get the right color and the right note and the right sound, and then settle down happily to whatever I'm doing. Up in the corner over my light table is a pegboard which I've had for many, many years, and it acts as a kind of talisman or good luck charm. There are specific objects on it which are never changed. Some of them I've had for many, many years. There's a brontosaurus which my nephew built for me, which can't be touched because if it were, it would dissolve instantly. There are picture postcards of my favorite painters, Watteau and William Blake, Winslow Homer. There are things from Europe, toys, which I love. There's a handmade puppet I bought in Munich, almost anything you can think of. Speaking of toys, I have some here which were made by my brother and myself in 1948. My brother is the mechanical genius and put them together, and these are little fairy tales, which I'm sure you're all very well acquainted with. This is Little Red Riding Hood. It has a lever which, when pulled out, causes Little Red Riding Hood to collapse in mortal terror, the wolf to rear his hideous head above the blanket, and when pushed back again, the world is back to normalcy. She's now standing expectantly, all ready to go through the same routine the rest of eternity. These toys are a family affair. My brother did the mechanics on them. I did the carving on them, and my sister made the blanket over the wolf's bed, or grandma's bed. We spent the whole summer of 1948, making these toys, until my father was appalled at having 3 grown children spending the summer making toys in the house, so we were all dumped out of the house to earn a living. However, we are very happy about them. They are constantly being repaired because of hard use put to them by nephew, niece, and assorted children in the family. Here's another one. This one is Aladdin. The genie pops out. Aladdin politely moves back so he doesn't get his head chopped off, and then back again. And now to some of the books that are lying around. I'd like to start with a book which really has nothing to do with children's books, and show how, in the end, it really does, although it would seem very far out. This is a book on a composer's life, a composer, Hugo Wolf, which I've recently read and reread a number of times. Hugo Wolf is a great favorite of mine because I like to think there is some kind of affinity in what we're both doing. He is putting music to poetry and finding the exact right nuance and exact right color to interpret the poetry. He was very careful about the poetry he chose. And I like to think of a drawing as being rather free of the page in terms of that it might dance or it might sing or might do something of that nature. And in the same way that he is fitting music to poetry, I am fitting little drawings to words or poetry. And this is a dummy of Where the Wild Things Are, which in the old days was called Where the Wild Horses Are. It was started in 1955 and is a series of tiny little episodes of a boy's adventure. It was not planned as a book. I happened to have a dummy which was too fat, and I cut off a slice, and I got this beautiful little slice, and it was perfect for a book. There are no words in the first dummy. It was done to music at the time, and I wanted to get the effect of a series of animated drawings just dancing across a page. I did not pick up the book again until some years later, and have had to put it aside over a period of time as the idea developed. It was not till May of 1963 that I did a dummy which was satisfactory and is quite close to the finished book. But I try to keep in it, although this has text and the pictures are now illustrations following text, what I wanted was the effect that I had gotten in the original dummy of 55, which was of a dance, of a musical episode. From this dummy, I then moved on to the finished book. Here is The Wild Things as it finally appeared in 63. Rather a large discrepancy between the size of the initial dummy and the finished book. I hope that is the only discrepancy, because I hope to accomplish in this what I did in that, which is a sense of music and dance and something not just glued onto the page in the dead sense. I'd like to turn to somebody else now who has always been a great favorite of mine, the German illustrator Wilhelm Busch. This is the Busch Bilderbogen. In turning to any page of Wilhelm Busch, and also this does hark back to the dancing again, these practically blast off the page. They are so animated, wildly funny, brilliantly colored illustrations. He has played a great part in my development. I think the book that I can think of that comes easiest to mind in terms of Busch is A Hole is to Dig, which again is a series of animated drawings throughout the book, all illustrating Miss Ruth Krauss's marvelous text. They are German influenced, of course, because of Busch. I think in all my books there has been this conscious sense of animation, or trying to get this effect. I know children have looked through some of my work and they have not so much read the text as flipped through the book, which pleases me no end, because we used to have flip books when we were children, which you would just, if I can do one of these, you can just flip through like that and the characters scurry across the paper. And it has a marvelous effect. It's the never-ending fascination of a movie, certainly. I'm holding one which I like to think has some of that effect, and that's Pierre. The expressions on his face and the movements of his body are all consciously formed so that you can flip him. It's something I like to have in my books. It represents dance again, as the movies does, as Chaplin did to me. And it's a lovely effect. There is another aspect of bookmaking, which of course is, I find very interesting and very important, as do all illustrators and publishers and printers, and that is the graphic end of bookmaking. And a lot of my books, which I collect and have quite a large collection in the upstairs part of this apartment, this is one of my favorite of them. It's the Fables of La Fontaine, illustrated by Grandville. And one of the reasons I like it so much is because of its pure elegance. It is a masterpiece of simplicity. Beautiful white paper, beautiful, beautiful ornate designs and chapter headings and etchings. And the entire effect is of something so serene and something so classic and lovely. At the same time, Grandville being Grandville, they are masterpieces of illustration. Everything about it is exquisite bookmaking. But then it makes sense only when it's part of the whole thing. If one picks up a book and is is dazzled by the beauty of the book and nothing else, then has failed. No matter how beautiful the paper, binding, typeface, and everything else concerned is, it should harmonize so that you cannot separate the book from the binding, the end papers, the title page, the typeface on the title page, the frontispiece. It should all become so blended, so uniform, that the feeling is that there is positively no other way this could have been done. Then I think graphics has made its point, and it is important. There's another aspect of bookmaking I'd like to talk about. This is really a problem of illustration, which has always interested me. This is a copy of Pinocchio with the original illustrations by Attilio Musino. This is a book that breaks all the rules of illustrating a book. One usually grows up with the feeling that a book should be illustrated in a specific style, and the problem always is in keeping to that specific style. And along comes Mr. Musino, who doesn't know about these rules, or obviously and purposefully forgets about them. I haven't counted the various styles in this book, but I would guess there are at least a dozen. He just does anything he likes. I think the important point I'm trying to make here is that one has to be completely immersed in the book one is illustrating. One has to love it and have a great passion for it, and then there are no rules. Instinctively the thing comes out right. One more aspect, and that is the painter and his influence on the book illustrator. This is a book of drawings by Goya. Goya has always, for me, been a tremendously powerful influence, someone who I admire greatly. And although he was a great painter, he was very conscious of the page and very conscious of graphics too. He was a great graphic artist, of course. In terms of how painters have influenced me, I can almost look at these assorted books on the table and tell you who I was madly in love with at the time. Here's Charlotte and the White Horse by Ruth Krauss, and I immediately see the walls covered with drawings of William Blake and Marc Chagall. Here's Mr. Rabbit and Lovely Present, Mr. Winslow Homer. Seven Tales from Anderson. All the Gothic artists in the entire world are shoved into this little book. It's a constant fountainhead, source of refreshment to go to the masters. They have done so much that we can learn from, and so many of them one can't classify as strictly painters. They were conscious in a way of book too. Certainly Chagall is one of the great illustrators of our times, and Picasso and Matisse, and the Gothic illustrators. The illuminated books are masterpieces of illustrated book. So that in order to indulge yourself, in order to enrich one's work, one can only go to these people for sources of inspiration. The art of illustrating is like any other art, which is an art of growing up into oneself, and whereas some of my earlier books reflect some of the masters and painters I admire so much, as Charlotte and Mr. Rabbit do, I like to think that the Wild Things comes to a kind of more myself look than almost anything I've done up to this date. I can see all the various artists in it, but happily they've come to a blend. Although I will always be influenced by other artists and always want to be influenced by other artists, I feel my style is beginning to gel. It has gelled up to a point in this book. It will develop and change possibly through the years, but this is a satisfactory conclusion to many of the books of the past few years for me.